Hi everybody. Today I'm at Mount Hope Cemetery, which is in uptown Waterloo. You can get to it from the Ion or the number 7 bus, which is right across from KCI and Central Fresh Mart. You get off there and walk through Central Fresh Mart, then you come down into the cemetery. I forgot my scarf today, so I'm wearing a mitten around my neck. It's giving me a rather, would you say, Renaissance Shakespearean look, which is potentially appropriate for being in a cemetery, although the cemetery is definitely not that old. So let's take a look around today. I've actually started right in the middle, pretty much the middle of the cemetery. That's the crypt back there, and we're on a road that kind of goes straight from Central Fresh Mart to Moore Street. A lot of people walk through here, a lot of people walk their dogs, and today it's really quiet. This is a spot where I sit a lot in the summer, sometimes in the winter, under this big tree. One of my favorite spots for sitting and reading, right near the crypt here, which I think is incredibly cool for this area. It's very British looking. I've never seen it opened. I mean, I guess some people might want to see into a crypt. I don't really want to see into it. Just watched the first episode of Lock and Key yesterday. Kind of reminds me of the well scene. So I definitely wouldn't want to necessarily go in, but look how beautiful that is, with Corinthian columns and arch. And we'll go up this path next to the crypt, but first I'll just show you a view of this hill with this beautiful white gravestone. Oh my goodness, I've been a bit tired this weekend. Gravestone pillar up on the hill. It's really hard to capture in one shot these trees because they're huge. This cemetery is pretty old. Parts of it are probably over 100 years old. Oh, for sure, probably 200 years old. So, no, that's too old. Probably 150 years old. And sorry, I thought I saw my friend. It's a popular spot for people, so you often run into people that you know. But no, she doesn't have a dog. That person's walking a dog. So this cemetery borders on Kitchener and Waterloo. The center line of the cemetery is, in fact, the dividing line between Kitchener and Waterloo, and the cemetery is actually administered by the two cities differently, which is kind of interesting. Sometimes you say, oh, a bunch of branches fell down, and they say, oh, go over to the other side and tell the Kitchener people, because that was the Kitchener side. Cool, okay. Out now. It's not super cold today, a bit damp, wind picking up, so I may have to stop talking for a little bit if it gets too windy. But I think when we were down among the pines, it was quieter. Here, wind's coming up. So if it stays windy, I'm going to put this on music for a little while. But we'll see how that goes. Corner of the cemetery that has some pretty cool graves. I think maybe some richer folks are in this side. Looks like kind of a mix of size of tombstones, but I want to show you a couple of very beautiful ones. Note that this grave is faced in a different direction, which is interesting. I know that most graves in cemeteries face east, where Jesus is supposed to come again, so that when Jesus comes again, people will be immediately ready to come out of their graves towards him. These are indeed facing east, so that makes sense. But this guy is facing north. So I love to know the story behind that. Cemeteries are just full of stories. This grave is very beautiful, with St. Francis on top. And what's neat is that some graves from the Victorian era, no, this is 1876, 1938. Some graves from the Victorian era and later had photos. The wife's has been removed. I remember it being there 20 years ago, so it's been vandalized, I believe. This is a picture of the husband. And if you go behind this beautiful grave, then there's a smaller grave, which is their son. And his picture is still pretty intact. I don't know how dark that is, if you can see it well. It's very bright here. Can't see the text very well today, but it says something to the effect that he died while praying at church. And I looked into that, and apparently that was fairly common if a child died, to indicate that they had been praying while they died. Sign, Kitchener Mount Hope Cemetery. We're just heading down now towards the more central part of the cemetery. I think given time constraints, I'll just show you the Kitchener half of the cemetery today. Very old stone. Very classic slab on a tilt. And behind it you can see Moore Street. So it's amazing that this cemetery is right in the middle of Uptown. It is incredibly big for a growing urban center. It has a very old feel, almost European, and a lot of people use this space very actively. There's not actually a lot of parks in our neighborhood, and people do tend to use this as a park. They don't get raucous, but they do walk and socialize. A lot of dog walking. Funny story, when I was working with the city and a developer on a consultation for a development, which is, maybe you can see it, it's right beyond the cemetery. You can see a machine there. We've really negotiated hard with the city and the developer to get park space put into that new development, because really we don't have much parks. And one thing that the developer said was, well, you have the cemetery, and the city said, the cemetery is not a park. And we were grateful for them for saying that, because the cemetery is indeed not a park, although it can function in similar ways to a park. There's another beautiful angel. Around to the very edge of the Kitchener side, you're looking now at the Waterloo side, and you can see what I mean. It's simpler, flatter geography, and the stones are more uniform. So I think they're newer. Now we'll come up the middle, and I'll give you a look down the vista. Here is the mother oak of the cemetery. Look how old and beautiful this tree is. This tree is probably giving life to so many trees here. I think I mentioned in a previous video what a mother tree is. So if you haven't looked that up yet, please do. In the very center of the cemetery, that's the vista down towards the Kitchener side and the crypt that I showed you. And then if I turn around, I look at the Waterloo side. We're going to go up the west side. You can see up on the Waterloo side there's a big hill. It's really nice to sit up there. The Seagram graves are up there, a very famous family here. The grave is a beautiful Celtic cross. Here's another crypt, a smaller and more modern one. If I had to guess the date of construction, I guess the 40s, mainly because the person who died first looks like it was in the 40s, but it has a more modernist look to it. I'm going to take you down one of the unmaintained paths so you can get a sense of it. This one is very beautiful. You can hear the train in the background. I love hearing a train in the background on a day like this. Quiet and still. Do you ever have a thing where you can remember a book that you read when you were in a location? I have it all the time. And I remember reading a book by Elizabeth Gilbert called The Signature of All Things, Under These Trees, one summer. And when I walk here, I remember that book. It's sort of like imagination augmented reality. I really like this tree. A lot of cedars have grown up here around the graves, and it's almost like a forest. Very German looking. So there are a lot of Germans in this cemetery, but a lot of other nationalities too. Especially in the Waterloo one, it's newer in some ways. Lots of Mennonites, lots of history, and a lot of squirrels. Look at all their tracks. They're going everywhere. Some of them might be dogs too. I think a lot of dogs and squirrels frequented this tree. The last jaunt of this section, we'll go up this west side road, and we'll end up, do a little turnaround, and we'll end up where we started. So this is the maintenance structure for the cemetery. I love it. This color is amazing. It has a very, I'm going to say arts and crafts. Wrong? Right? You let me know. I'm still learning architectural styles. But it's very horizontal, has a high overhanging roof, and it's very picturesque. But you tell me if it's something different. This area of the cemetery has many great coniferous trees grown up. Let's go look at this grave. I don't think I've ever looked at it up close before. I don't usually like walking on graves. I try not to. Something my mom taught me. Try to walk around the edges of the grave if you can. It's respectful. So we're looking further down now, back towards the south side of the cemetery. And I think we'll just cut around back down to the original crypt, and we'll take a look at a couple more beautiful gravestones. And then, whoop, fell in a little bit of a hole there. Oh, another hole. Don't think I'm walking on graves, but you know, I probably am, so I'm going to be a little more careful. Don't walk on graves. Don't fall in hole. Oh God, imagine the grave was the hole. That's a horrible thought. But you know, for being in a cemetery, this has not gotten too dark, so a little bit of mild horror could set a very Edgar Allan Poe sort of tone. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Exploring Waterloo Region with Charlotte. I hope you enjoyed the cemetery. This is one of my favorite places in Kitchener-Waterloo. It's fairly close to my house, and I've spent a lot of time here over the past 20 years. And it never gets boring and it never gets less beautiful to me. It's always an adventure, a peaceful adventure, a place to come where I feel peaceful and mentally stimulated and connected to history and to nature. If you live nearby, you should definitely come check it out. And if you live far away, I hope you enjoy this video about it. Have a great day. Happy adventuring.